The stars burned like dying candles across the void, and Admiral Kethara watched another one go dark. Her hands trembled as she gripped the command chair of the last Zephyrian battleship. Around her, the bridge crew worked in grim silence. They all knew what that darkness meant. The void swarm had consumed another world. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, his voice cracked with exhaustion. "We've lost contact with the Meridian Defense Fleet. All ships. Gone." Kethara closed her eyes for a moment. The Meridian Fleet had been their strongest force. 27 capital ships and over 100 support vessels. Now they were space dust, consumed by the relentless machines that had been hunting them across the galaxy. "How many worlds have we lost this cycle?" she asked quietly. 17, Admiral. The evacuation ships from the outer colonies are still trying to reach the core systems. 17 worlds. Billions of lives. The Zephyrian Confederation had once ruled over 300 star systems. They had been proud of their advanced technology, their powerful fleets, their elegant cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants. Now they were running like frightened children from an enemy they could barely understand. The void swarm had appeared from the deep dark between galaxies 3 years ago. At first, they seemed like any other hostile force. The Confederation had fought pirates, rebels, and other alien species before. But the swarm was different. They didn't want territory or resources. They didn't negotiate or retreat. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on. Their ships were black as space itself, covered in strange armor that seemed to drink light. Confederation weapons barely scratched them. When a swarm ship was damaged, it would repair itself using materials torn from destroyed planets. When the Confederation tried new tactics, the swarm adapted within hours. It was like fighting the darkness itself. "Admiral," her tactical officer spoke up, "the Council is requesting your presence. They're discussing final options." Kethara knew what that meant. The evacuation protocols. The abandonment of their home galaxy. The end of everything they had built over thousands of years. She walked through the corridors of her flagship, the Starfire's Dream. Once, these halls had been filled with the laughter of young officers eager for adventure among the stars. Now, they echoed with the footsteps of survivors who had seen too much death. The council chamber was nearly empty. Of the 12 high admirals who had once debated strategy around this table, only 3 remained. The others had died fighting the swarm or had chosen to stay with their doomed worlds. Kethara, Admiral Voss, greeted her with tired eyes. "We've been waiting for you." She took her seat and looked around the table. These were some of the finest military minds in the galaxy, beings who had studied warfare for centuries. Now they sat like broken old men, staring at star charts that showed nothing but retreat routes. "The hegemony has refused our request for aid," Admiral Thane reported. "They say the swarm is our problem. The Stellar Republic won't even answer our calls. We're alone." Kethara wasn't surprised. The other galactic powers had watched the Confederation's fall with cold calculation. They thought their own borders were safe. They would learn otherwise soon enough. "What about the newer species?" she asked. "The ones from the outer rim?" Voss shook his head. "Most of them don't have the technology to help. The few that do are too far away to matter." "There is one possibility," Admiral Thane said slowly, "though it's probably useless." The others looked at him with curiosity. "The humans," he continued. "They're close to the front lines now. That we've retreated from the spiral arm sectors." Kethara frowned. She remembered the humans, a young species that had only discovered faster than light travel about 50 years ago. They had one star system, a handful of crude ships, and technology that was centuries behind Confederation standards. The diplomatic corps had made contact with them as a matter of routine, offering basic trade agreements for their raw materials. "The humans?" Voss almost laughed. "Thane, they barely have a space fleet. Their largest ship couldn't fight a Confederation escort vessel, let alone a swarm destroyer." "I know," Thane replied, "but they're the only ones close enough to respond quickly. And maybe even primitive ships could buy us time for more evacuations." The chamber fell silent. Kethara considered the option. It was desperate beyond measure. The humans would probably be destroyed within minutes of encountering the swarm. But if it delayed the enemy advance by even a few days, thousands more Zephyrian lives could be saved. "It's worth trying," she said finally. "Admiral Voss, prepare your fastest diplomatic ship. I'll go to Earth personally. You?" Voss stared at her. "Kethara, you're needed here. Send an ambassador." "No." She stood up, her decision made. "If we're asking these primitives to die for us, the least I can do is ask them myself." The journey to the Sol system took 18 hours through the damaged jump gates. Kethara used the time to study what little information they had about humans. They were a curious species. They had spread across their home system quickly after developing spaceflight, building stations around every planet and major asteroid. Their ships were blocky and inefficient, but they had built a lot of them. More interesting were the reports about their behavior. Humans seemed to approach every challenge with the same attitude. Build more, try harder, never give up. Their diplomats were polite, but never seemed impressed by Confederation technology. When offered advanced weapons in trade, they had politely declined, saying they preferred to develop their own. When Kethara's ship finally reached Earth space, she was surprised by how busy it looked. Human ships moved constantly between planets, space stations, and asteroid facilities. For a supposedly primitive species, they certainly kept themselves busy. Luna Station appeared on their screens, a sprawling complex of docks and habitation modules orbiting Earth's moon. Her pilot requested permission to dock, and a cheerful human voice guided them in. The human admiral who met her was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and graying hair. She introduced herself as Sarah Chen and welcomed Kethara with formal courtesy. "Admiral," Chen said as they sat in a simple conference room, "your message mentioned an urgent threat to galactic peace. How can we help?" Kethara explained the situation. The Void Swarm. The destroyed worlds. The desperate retreat of her people. She tried to keep the panic out of her voice as she described the enemy that had broken the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Admiral Chen listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "You're asking us to fight alongside you," Chen said finally. "I'm asking you to help evacuate civilians while we retreat," Kethara corrected. "I won't lie to you, Admiral. Your ships won't survive long against the swarm, but even a few hours could save thousands of lives." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. "Give me 48 hours to discuss this with my government. I think you might be surprised by our answer." Admiral Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of Luna Station after her meeting with the alien admiral. Her face showed nothing, but her mind was racing. The Void Swarm was real. Everything the intelligence reports had predicted was happening exactly as Earth's strategists had feared. She took an elevator down to level 7, a section of the station that didn't appear on any public maps. Her hand pressed against a scanner, and heavy blast doors slid open with a soft hiss. The corridor beyond was stark white, lined with more security checkpoints than most government buildings. At the end of the hall, she entered a room where 5 people waited around a conference table. These were the leaders of the most secret project in human history. "Well?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb, leaning forward with intense eyes. As head of the Terran Defense Initiative, he had spent the last 50 years preparing for this moment. "It's exactly what we thought," Chen replied, taking her seat. "The Zephyrians have lost everything. Their technology, their fleets, their worlds. They're asking us for help because they're desperate." General Rodriguez, head of military operations, shook his head. "They still think we're primitives. Even now, when they need us, they assume our ships are worthless." "Good," said Director Kim from Intelligence. "The longer they think that, the better." Chen looked around the table at these people who had kept humanity's greatest secret for half a century. When first contact had been made with the Zephyrian Confederation, most of Earth had celebrated. Humanity was finally part of a larger galactic community. They could learn from advanced alien civilizations and take their place among the stars. But a few people had asked different questions. What if these aliens weren't friendly? What if humanity needed to defend itself? What if the galaxy was more dangerous than it appeared? President Martinez had made the decision that changed everything. Publicly, humanity would play the role of grateful newcomers, eager to learn from their alien neighbors. Privately, they would prepare for the worst. "Give me the current status," Chen said. Dr. Webb activated a holographic display that filled the center of the table. "Project Silent Running is complete. We have 437 active warships, from destroyers to dreadnoughts. The asteroid belt facilities are producing 3 new ships per week. Mars Base Alpha has finished the prototype for the reality anchor system." The display showed ship designs that would have amazed any alien engineer. Sleek vessels that could phase in and out of normal space. Weapons that used controlled black holes as projectiles. Armor that could adapt to any energy frequency. "What about the Excalibur project?" asked General Rodriguez. "Online and ready," Webb replied. "We can turn any moon or asteroid into a directed energy weapon with 6 hours' notice. The targeting computers can track 1 million separate objects simultaneously." Chen nodded. For 50 years, while the galaxy had dismissed humanity as primitive, Earth's best minds had been solving problems that alien species had never even considered. They had taken every piece of alien technology they could legally acquire, studied it, improved it, and then invented things that went far beyond anything the Confederation had ever dreamed of. "The Zephyrians shared their basic shield technology with us 20 years ago," Director Kim continued. "They thought they were being generous, giving us simple defensive systems. They never realized we reverse-engineered it and created barriers that can stop anything in their arsenal." "What about intelligence on the swarm?" Chen asked. Dr. Webb's expression grew grim. "We've been tracking them for 6 months. Our deep space monitoring stations picked up their approach long before the Zephyrians realized they were in danger. The swarm is everything we feared and more." The hologram shifted to show dark, angular ships moving through space like a plague of metal locusts. Their armor absorbed light, making them nearly invisible. Their weapons tore through matter at the atomic level. Worst of all, they learned from every battle, adapting their tactics and technology to counter whatever they faced. "They've destroyed 43 civilizations in the last 3 years," Webb continued. "Each time, they got stronger. They take the best technology from their victims and integrate it into their own forces." "But they haven't faced us," General Rodriguez said grimly. "No, they haven't," Chen agreed. "The question is whether we reveal ourselves now or wait for a better opportunity." President Martinez spoke for the first time. She had been listening silently, weighing the decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. "The Zephyrians asked for our help," she said slowly. "Every species in the galaxy will know what we've been hiding." "There's another consideration," Director Kim added. "Our models show the swarm will reach Earth space within 2 years if they're not stopped. This isn't just about helping aliens. This is about survival." Chen stood and walked to the viewport that looked out over Earth's moon. She could see human ships moving between the various installations, but she knew the aliens couldn't see what was really there. Hidden shipyards, cloaked weapons platforms, and manufacturing facilities that had been built in the shadows of craters. "I've been thinking about this for 50 years, she said. "Ever since I was a young officer and we made first contact. I always wondered what would happen when the galaxy realized what humans are really capable of." She turned back to the group. "We've had peace to prepare because other species underestimated us. They saw one star system and a few crude ships, and decided we weren't worth worrying about. But that was never going to last forever." Dr. Webb nodded. "The swarm changes everything. If they win, they'll eventually come for us anyway. If we hide now and let the Zephyrians fall, we'll face them alone. But if we reveal ourselves and fight," General Rodriguez added, "we'll have allies. Scared allies who will do anything to stay on our good side." President Martinez made her decision with the calmness that had defined her career. "We answer their call. Full deployment. It's time for humanity to step out of the shadows." Chen felt a mixture of excitement and dread. After decades of secrecy, the moment had finally come. The galaxy was about to learn that the primitive humans from Sol had been preparing for war since the day they first looked up at the stars. "What do we tell Admiral Cathara?" she asked. "We tell her yes," Martinez replied. "We tell her humanity will help. We just don't tell her how much help we're bringing." Chen smiled for the first time since the meeting began. She's expecting a few crewed ships and some brave volunteers. She's about to get the most advanced fleet in galactic history. Dr. Webb began shutting down the holographic display. The Zephyrians wanted aid from primitives. They're going to get salvation from legends. Quote, "Doctor." As the meeting ended and the participants began making their final preparations, none of them fully understood what they were unleashing. Humanity had spent 50 years becoming something the galaxy had never seen. A species that prepared for war in secret and waited for the right moment to reveal the truth. That moment had finally come. Admiral Cathara spent 2 days aboard Luna Station, waiting for the humans to make their decision. She tried not to show her impatience. But time was running out. Every hour they delayed meant more Zephyrian worlds would fall to the swarm. The human station was busy but unremarkable. She saw their blocky cargo ships moving between planets, their simple patrol craft escorting merchant vessels, and their basic manufacturing platforms around the larger asteroids. It looked exactly like what she expected from a young species that had barely learned to build in space. On the second morning, Admiral Chen requested another meeting. Cathara hoped for good news, but she prepared herself for rejection. Why would these primitive people want to fight an enemy that had destroyed the most powerful fleet in the galaxy? "Admiral Cathara," Chen said, as they sat in the same simple conference room. "Humanity has considered your request. We will help." Relief flooded through the Zephyrian commander. "Thank you, Admiral. I know this is a great risk for your people. How many ships can you provide?" 3, Chen smiled slightly. "All of them." Before Cathara could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout Luna Station. She looked around in confusion as human technicians rushed to their stations. Had the swarm somehow found them here? "Admiral," Chen said calmly, "I think it would be better if you saw this for yourself. Would you join me on the observation deck?" They took an elevator to the top of the station, where a large viewing area looked out over the space around Earth's moon. Cathara expected to see the usual traffic of human ships, but something was wrong. The space around them looked empty. Then the stars began to change. What Cathara had thought was empty space suddenly filled with massive shapes as ships began to appear. Not the crude human vessels she expected, but sleek warships that seemed to be made of liquid metal and energy. They materialized out of nothing, their cloaking systems shutting down to reveal vessels larger than anything in her experience. A dreadnought twice the size of her own flagship appeared directly in front of the observation deck. Its hull was smooth and dark, covered in weapon systems she couldn't identify. Along its sides, symbols spelled out its name in human writing: TDS Prometheus. "How?" Cathara whispered, staring at the impossible sight. "We've been building for 50 years, Chen replied. "Every alien trade agreement, every technology exchange, every diplomatic meeting has been part of our preparation. We learned from you, improved on what we learned, and then created things you never imagined." More ships continued appearing. Carriers that dwarfed small moons deployed fighter wings by the thousands. Destroyers moved with impossible grace, their engines leaving no exhaust trail. Cruisers that looked more like works of art than weapons of war took positions in perfect formation. "This is impossible," Cathara said. "Our surveys of your system showed only basic industrial capacity. We would have detected construction of this magnitude." "You detected what we wanted you to detect," Chen explained. "The shipyards are hidden inside asteroids. The construction facilities are cloaked behind the outer planets. We've been very careful about what visitors are allowed to see." A communication panel near the viewing area activated, and Cathara heard voices coordinating the massive fleet. "Prometheus Actual, this is Carrier Group 7. All wings deployed and ready. Destroyer Squadron 12 reporting all systems green. Dreadnought Division 3 standing by for jump coordinates." Cathara counted the ships around them and stopped when she reached 300. There were too many to track, and more were still appearing. "How many ships do you have?" she asked weakly. 437 active warships, Chen replied. "We can have another 50 completed within the week if needed." The Zephyrian admiral felt dizzy. The entire Confederation Navy at its peak had fielded maybe 200 capital ships. The humans had built more than twice that number in secret, using technology that seemed to come from science fiction rather than reality. "Your weapons," she managed to say. "What kind of armament do these ships carry?" Chen touched a control panel, and the nearest destroyer demonstrated. A beam of pure energy lanced out from its main gun and struck a small asteroid several thousand kilometers away. The asteroid didn't just explode. It seemed to fold in on itself and disappear completely. "Reality anchors," Chen explained. "They lock matter into normal space-time, preventing the kind of phase shifting the swarm uses. The beam weapons manipulate gravity at the quantum level. We also have fighters that can slip between dimensions and weapons that create temporary black holes." Kethara could barely process what she was hearing. These weren't just advanced weapons. They were technologies that her own scientists had only theorized about. "The swarm adapts," she said. "They learn from every battle and counter new tactics within hours." "We know," Chen replied. "We've been watching them for months. Our strategy doesn't rely on single weapons or simple tactics. We fight like humans have always fought. We adapt faster than our enemies." A human officer approached them. "Admiral Chen, the fleet is ready for departure. All ships report green status across the board." Chen turned to Kethara. "Admiral, we'll need detailed intelligence about swarm positions, fleet movements, and civilian evacuation zones. Our ships can reach the front lines in 18 hours. Will that be fast enough?" Kethara stared at her. 18 hours to cross half the galaxy? Her fastest ships needed 3 days to cover that distance. "How is that possible?" she asked. "Jump drives," Chen said simply. "We don't use the gate network. Our ships create their own temporary wormholes." The Zephyrian admiral looked out at the impossible fleet surrounding them. Ships that could cross the galaxy in hours, weapons that rewrote the laws of physics, technology that made her own advanced civilization look primitive. And all of it had been hidden from the galaxy for 50 years. "Why?" she asked. "Why keep this secret? You could have ruled half the galaxy with this kind of power." Chen's expression grew serious. "Because ruling isn't the same as protecting. We learned from studying your history, Admiral. Every great galactic empire eventually falls to something they didn't see coming. We preferred to stay hidden until we were sure we could handle whatever threats might emerge. And now? Now the swarm has forced our hand. They're a threat to every living thing in the galaxy, including Earth. Hiding is no longer an option." Kethara felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Fear because she was realizing that humanity was far more powerful than any species had suspected. Hope because that power was about to be turned against the enemy that had destroyed her civilization. "There's something else," Chen continued. "Our intelligence suggests the swarm isn't the real threat. They're just the advance force for something much worse, something that's been sleeping in the space between galaxies." "What do you mean?" Chen looked out at her fleet. "Hundreds of impossible ships ready for war. We mean that, after we destroy the swarm, we're going to make sure nothing like them ever threatens the galaxy again. It's time for Earth's children to do what we've always done best, which is win wars that everyone else thought were impossible to win." The fleet began to move, ships larger than cities sliding through space with deadly grace. Admiral Kethara watched them form up for the jump to Zephyrian space, and she realized that everything had changed. The humans weren't coming to help. They were coming to save the galaxy, and they had the power to do it. The Kepler system had once been the crown jewel of the Zephyrian Confederation. 7 inhabited planets, each with billions of citizens, surrounded by massive space stations and orbital cities. Now it was the last desperate stronghold of a dying civilization. Admiral Kethara stood on the bridge of the TDS Prometheus, watching her homeworld through the main screen. Kepler Prime looked like a dying ember, its once bright cities flickering as evacuation ships fled toward the outer system. Around the planet, The remnants of the Confederation Defense Fleet fought a hopeless battle against the advancing Void Swarm. Swarm ships moved through space like a plague of black metal insects. Their hulls absorbed light, making them difficult to track until they opened fire. Wherever their weapons touched, matter simply ceased to exist. Zephyrian ships that had taken decades to build were destroyed in seconds. Swarm fleet composition? Admiral Chen asked calmly from the command chair beside Kethara. Tactical shows 1,200 enemy vessels, reported the human sensor officer. 6 dreadnoughts, 42 heavy cruisers, and the rest support ships. They're maintaining standard formation 7. Kethara was amazed by the humans' casual efficiency. They spoke about the massive enemy force like it was a routine patrol. What's their ETA to the evacuation zones? Chen continued. 4 hours, Admiral. The civilian transports won't clear the gravity well in time. Chen nodded. Signal the fleet. Execute Phoenix Protocol. Time to show these machines what real warfare looks like. The human fleet spread out across the system in perfect coordination. 400 ships moved like dancers, each one knowing exactly where it needed to be. Kethara watched in fascination as carriers positioned themselves behind planets, while destroyers took advantage of asteroid fields for cover. Prometheus to all ships, Chen announced over the comm. Remember, these machines adapt to our tactics. Don't give them time to learn. Hit hard, hit fast, and keep changing the rules. The swarm seemed to notice the human fleet for the first time. Their formation shifted. Black ships turning toward this new threat. Kethara had seen this before. The swarm would analyze the human ships, identify their weaknesses, and then systematically destroy them. But something was wrong. The swarm ships were turning, but the humans weren't there anymore. Stealth systems activated, the tactical officer reported. Fleet is now invisible to swarm sensors. The enemy fleet found itself firing at empty space while the human ships had simply vanished. But they hadn't retreated. They had spread out in a 3-dimensional formation that surrounded the swarm forces without being detected. All ships, initiate reality anchor protocol, Chen ordered. Lock them in normal space. The space around the swarm fleet suddenly shimmered as hundreds of human ships activated their reality anchors. The swarm vessels, which had been phasing in and out of normal space to avoid attacks, found themselves trapped in a single-dimensional plane. They can't adapt to our tactics if they can't escape, Chen explained to Kethara. Now comes the fun part. The human attack began like nothing Kethara had ever witnessed. Ships appeared out of nowhere, fired weapons that bent the laws of physics, and disappeared again before the swarm could respond. Destroyer squadrons used gravitational slingshots to accelerate past the speed of light, appearing behind enemy formations before the machines could track them. Fighter wings deployed from the carriers moved like schools of metal fish, their coordination so perfect it seemed like a single organism. They didn't just attack the swarm ships, they confused them, making the enemy think there were threats everywhere at once. Lancer Squadron, execute Fenrir Protocol on Target Cluster 7, Chen ordered. Kethara watched as a dozen human fighters approached a group of swarm cruisers. Instead of firing weapons, they seemed to simply disappear. A moment later, the swarm ships began tearing themselves apart from the inside. Dimensional mines, the tactical officer explained. The fighters plant them inside the enemy hulls by phasing through their armor. A massive swarm dreadnought tried to bring its main weapons to bear on the Prometheus, but found itself facing something impossible. The human ship seemed to exist in several places at once, its image splitting into multiple copies that moved independently. Quantum mirrors, Chen said. We're actually in all those positions simultaneously until the enemy chooses which one to shoot at. Then, quantum mechanics collapses the probability wave, and we're somewhere else. The swarm dreadnought fired at one of the mirror images, but the beam passed harmlessly through empty space. The real Prometheus appeared directly above the enemy ship and fired its main gun. Kethara expected to see the familiar beam weapons used by most civilizations. Instead, a sphere of absolute darkness erupted from the human ship and engulfed the swarm dreadnought. When the darkness faded, there was nothing left but empty space. Controlled black hole, Chen explained casually. We compress a small amount of matter into a singularity, fire it at the target, and then let it expand for exactly 0.3 seconds before reversing the process. The battle continued for 3 hours, but it wasn't really a battle, it was a demonstration. The swarm forces, which had conquered entire civilizations, found themselves completely outmatched by tactics they couldn't understand or counter. Human ships fought like they had been designed by mad scientists. Cruisers split into smaller vessels when attacked, only to recombine when the threat was gone. Destroyers used time dilation fields to slow enemy weapons while accelerating their own. Carriers deployed fighter wings that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 swarm vessels." Kethara was shocked. "They surrender? The swarm has never retreated or given up. They fight until they're destroyed." Chen looked troubled. "That's because they've never faced an enemy they couldn't adapt to. Our tactics aren't just different. They're impossible according to normal physics. We're breaking their programming." The surviving swarm ships had stopped attacking and were broadcasting on all frequencies. The messages were simple. They wanted to negotiate. "What do we do with them?" Kethara asked. "We study them," Chen replied. "And we prepare for what comes next." Because the swarm was just the beginning. On the main screen, space around Kepler Prime was filled with debris from destroyed enemy ships. The planet's surface glowed with the light of restored cities as power grids came back online. Evacuation ships that had been fleeing in terror were now returning home. But Admiral Chen's attention was focused on something else. Deep space sensors were picking up new signals from the edge of the galaxy. Something massive was stirring in the void between star systems, awakened by the swarm's defeat. "Admiral," the sensor officer reported, "long-range scanners are detecting movement in the galactic core. Whatever created the swarm is responding to our victory." Chen smiled grimly. "Good. Let it come. The galaxy has been afraid of threats from the dark for too long. It's time they learned that Earth's children aren't afraid of anything." The human fleet began forming up around Kepler Prime, their ships glowing with the energy of weapons that could rewrite reality itself. They had saved one world, but the real war was just beginning. Kethara looked out at the impossible ships that had rescued her people and realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's greatest threat had just met its match, and now everyone would learn what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to war. The legends were about to become reality. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler's Gate, the galaxy had learned to speak softly when mentioning humanity. Admiral Kethara walked through the restored capital city of Kepler Prime, watching her people rebuild their lives. The scars of war were still visible. Damaged buildings stood next to gleaming new structures. Memorial walls honored the billions who had died during the swarm invasion. But there was hope here now. Protected by the sleek human ships that patrolled the system's outer boundaries. She had been invited to attend a conference on Luna Station, along with representatives from every major galactic power. The message had been polite but firm. Earth wished to discuss the new security arrangement for the galaxy. The journey to Sol took only 6 hours aboard the human transport ship assigned to her. The vessel was small compared to their warships, but it moved through space with the same impossible grace. When she asked how they traveled so quickly, the human pilot simply smiled and said, "We take shortcuts." Luna Station had changed since her first visit. What had once appeared to be a simple trading post now revealed itself as a massive military and diplomatic complex. Additional modules had been uncloaked, showing the true scale of human construction. The docking bays alone were larger than most space stations. The conference room held representatives from 17 different species, including the proud hegemony, the ancient stellar republic, and the mysterious void touched. All of them sat quietly as Admiral Chen took her place at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," Chen began. "Recent events have forced us to reconsider galactic security arrangements." Kethara looked around the room at faces that ranged from curious to frightened to calculating. Everyone here had seen the reports from Kepler. Everyone knew that the balance of power had shifted permanently. Ambassador Threx of the hegemony spoke first. His people had ruled 300 systems for over 1,000 years, and they weren't used to feeling small. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully. The hegemony appreciates humanity's intervention against the swarm. However, we must discuss the implications of your actions. You've revealed military capabilities that far exceed anything previously known. That's correct, Chen replied simply. Were you planning to inform the galactic community about these capabilities? Asked Senator Vallis from the Stellar Republic. The existence of such a fleet fundamentally alters the strategic balance. Chen leaned back in her chair. We informed you exactly when we needed to. The swarm was a threat to every living thing in the galaxy. We dealt with it. The room fell silent. The casual way Chen dismissed what had been the greatest threat in galactic history was both impressive and terrifying. What do you want? Asked the representative from the void touched, her voice echoing strangely through her translation device. Peace, Chen replied, and preparation for what's coming next. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Images appeared showing the deep space beyond the galactic rim, where massive shapes moved in the darkness between stars. Our victory against the swarm has awakened something, Chen continued. The entities that created the swarm are taking notice of our galaxy. Intelligence suggests they've been sleeping for millions of years, waiting for local species to develop enough to be worth their attention. Kethara felt a chill. You're saying there are more of them? We're saying the swarm was a scouting force, Chen replied. The real threat is something we can't even properly comprehend yet. Our deep space monitors have detected objects the size of small moons moving toward galactic space. Ambassador Threx shifted uncomfortably. What do you propose we do about it? We prepare, Chen said. Humanity is willing to share defensive technology with allied species. We'll provide protection for your worlds and training for your fleets. In return, we need resources, manufacturing capacity, and coordination. You're asking us to become your vassals, Senator Vallis accused. Chen's expression didn't change. I'm offering you survival. You can maintain your independence and face the next threat alone, or you can work with us and have a chance of living through what's coming. The holographic display shifted to show human ships patrolling different star systems. Sleek destroyers escorting hegemony trade convoys. Human carriers stationed near Stellar Republic colonies. Fighter wings training alongside alien pilots. This is what cooperation looks like, Chen explained. Your people get to keep their governments, their cultures, their way of life. They just get to keep them while being protected by the most advanced fleet in galactic history. Kethara understood the choice being offered. It wasn't really a choice at all. Humanity had revealed they could destroy any existing fleet without significant effort. They could take whatever they wanted by force. Instead, they were offering partnership. What about species that refuse? Asked the void-touched representative. Chen was quiet for a moment. We'll respect their decision. But we won't be able to protect them from what's coming. And we won't risk the security of our allies by allowing hostile forces to operate from their territory. The message was clear without being threatening. Join the new order or be left to face the future alone. One by one, the representatives began agreeing to the terms. The hegemony negotiated for favorable trade agreements. The Stellar Republic requested human advisors for their military. Even the proud void-touched agreed to limited cooperation in exchange for access to human quantum technologies. After the formal session ended, Kethara found herself alone with Admiral Chen on the station's observation deck. They looked out at Earth, a small blue world that had somehow become the center of galactic civilization. Do you ever regret it? Kethara asked. Staying hidden for so long? You could have prevented so much suffering if you'd revealed yourselves earlier. Chen considered the question. Maybe. But we also might have created different problems. Power without wisdom leads to tyranny. We needed time to understand what we wanted to become. And what's that? Guardians, Chen replied. Not rulers or conquerors, but protectors. Your legends speak of great fleets that appear in times of darkness to defend the innocent. We never intended to become one of those legends. We just wanted to be ready when we were needed. Through the viewport, they could see human ships moving between the planets of Sol system. But now Kethara knew that these visible vessels were just a small part of humanity's true capabilities. Hidden throughout the galaxy, human fleets patrolled trade routes and defended vulnerable worlds. Cloaked monitoring stations watched for signs of new threats. The entities from beyond the galaxy, Kethara said. How long do we have? Our best estimates suggest 2 years before they reach the outer systems, Chen replied. Maybe less if they accelerate. Will we be ready? Chen smiled, and for the first time, Kethara saw something beyond professional confidence in her expression. There was anticipation there, and a fierce joy that spoke of a species that had been born for conflict. Admiral, when these entities arrive, they're going to discover something that the swarm learned too late. Humanity doesn't just fight wars, we end them. She gestured toward the busy space around Earth, where human ships moved with deadly purpose. They're about to learn why some species are born not just to reach the stars, but to defend them. The galaxy asked for aid, and we gave them legends. Now those legends are about to become something even greater. What's that? Reality. As Kethara prepared to return to her homeworld, she carried with her the knowledge that everything had changed. The galaxy had a protector now, a species that had prepared for war in secret and emerged when darkness threatened to consume everything. The humans called it the Terran Defense Initiative, but history would remember it differently. Future generations would tell stories of the fleet that appeared from nowhere to save civilization from extinction. They would speak of the guardians who watched from the shadows, ready to face any threat that dared to challenge the peace they protected. And in the deep space between galaxies, ancient entities stirred from their eternal sleep, unaware that they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. A species that considered the impossible to be just another challenge to overcome. The legends had become real. Now they were about to become eternal.